Hey guys, I'm back for my second installment of things I'd have on the farm, depending on the species, and today, cattle edition. So generally speaking, I'm talking about dairy cattle here because I can tie my cow up and push her into a corner and mess with her without getting kicked in the head or mowed down, those kind of things. Though we do have beef cattle and we have a squeeze chute that we can squish them through. Generally speaking, I do more of a wait and see approach on the beef cattle because I just don't like being beat up. So, go with the information that I'm giving you kind of with some, grains of salt. So the first thing that I would definitely have on hand would be, a lot of these lists are going to be the same with some slight adjustments, would be, fluid therapy. So an IV set, some Ringer's lactate if I can get it, saline if I can't, and definitely calcium gluconate. I use a lot of calcium gluconate on my cow when she calves. It not only offers some fluid, but it also gives her some calcium because milk fever and some of those metabolic issues can pop up right after they calve, especially in high-producing dairy cows. Beef cows don't oftentimes need that stuff. Usually you just kind of see how they're doing. They're usually pretty perky. The calves are the ones you have to watch, initially. Most beef cows manage calving just fine. The next thing I would have on hand for having, bovines would be 18 gauge and 16 gauge needles, and 6cc, 12cc, and 20cc syringes. Again, those are for vaccines if you use vaccines, antibiotic therapy, fluid therapy maybe. I don't do a whole lot of shots, but I do vitamins for my cow. I'll give her vitamin shots, like a Multimin 90 before she calves and before I breed her. Things like that. So it's important to have, a good supply of needles and syringes. The next thing would be, again, stitching needles and suture. I don't use staples too much on cows because their skin is so thick, but I will occasionally pop in a couple of sutures if they hang up on a fence and rip their skin open and it looks like it's going to be a problem. A lot of times, just keeping the flies out is enough. They heal up so fast. Cows are really sturdy animals. Again, a scalpel would be another thing I might have on hand, or a pair of really sharp scissors just to cut off any loose skin tags or just creating a problem that aren't going to heal back up and heal back in. I just cut those off. The next thing I might have on hand would be some hoof nippers. I don't particularly like using hoof nippers on cattle just because they're so big and they can swing their feet around so much. I prefer, with my dairy cow at least, to use a piece of plywood, a hammer and a chisel, and just kind of smack the chunks of hoof off if I'm trying to trim them. Obviously, if I need to see in between the claws or see the bottom of the foot, then I'm going to have to use some, ropes and whatnot to pull the foot up and kind of get it so it's held on its own so that I can look without getting kicked in the face, hopefully, right? And that leads me to restraints. With a cow, if it's a nice dairy cow that's used to being handled, or, a show calf or something that's grown up and become part of your herd, probably a halter and a lead rope will work just fine to walk her up and tie her to something. Maybe a rope around her belly and, push her into a tree or a fence and kind of tether her there so she's stuck there. You can use another rope to lift feet, do that kind of thing. Or my example would be, I would like to have at least one halter, 3 lead ropes, a long length of rope, and if need be, a squeeze chute would be great. The long length of rope works great for casting a cow because you can, tether them to something solid, say a tree or a vehicle or something, and then run ropes around their girth and around their flank, and then when you pull, you can actually bring them down to their knees and push them over. And we've done that before when we had a cow with DA abomasum that was displaced, where we needed to lay her down and slowly flip her up on her back and roll her back over, and so that abomasum would float back to where it needed to go. And when she got up, all of a sudden she was hungry, ran over to eat, drank, fill her stomach and everything up with food. No problem. We didn't have a problem again. So that was nice having that big long length of rope that was able to go that distance all the way from the object to the halter to the girth, around to the flank, around, and then back to where we were standing. So that's another part of the restraints that I would definitely have in my cabinet. For cattle, and as far as supplements go, I like to leave out a loose trace mineral salt. I like to leave out a beef or dairy mineral. Again, I like kelp. Baking soda is a good one to have out. Epsom salts during calving, and molasses is another one during calving, which is good to have out. I like to keep a bloat treatment in my cabinet just in case a cow gets a frothy bloat. And for wound cleaning, basically I use alcohol, chlorhexidine, and iodine. Don't get too fancy with my wound cleaning in cattle. Maybe blue coat if I've got it sitting there. That's pretty much all I would have for cows, that I use frequently. Obviously mastitis strips and, things like that you might have if you have a dairy cow that tends to have, high somatic cell count or mastitic, udder. Neonatal supplies if you're calving out cows. Again, you can look that up to get a good supply of neonatal supplies, or a calving kit, they'd call it. I like to have some sort of a calf puller, say a ratchet puller if I'm by myself, so I can ratchet a calf out. A tube feeder to feed a weak calf, bottles and nipples because I usually bottle feed my dairy calves, and then a selenium supplement like Musi. It's similar to a Bosi, but it's much stronger, made more for cattle. And then, of course, towels to dry any wet, cold calves off and get them warmed up. We also keep a calf blanket handy, so when my dairy cows calve, usually I'm having them calve in the fall, late fall, early winter, because then they're not having a problem I don't want them calving during fair season, because that can be a problem. So we wait till all the fairs are over, then I have my cows calve. And so I like to keep, it basically looks like a dog jacket, and you just put it on the calf for the first day to make sure that they get dry and warmed up, and I pull the calves right away so that I can bottle raise them and everything. Hope that helps. If you have any things you suggest in your calving kit or your beef or dairy cow supplies, hey, leave it in the comments below. Everybody that can read it might learn something. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.